Today, I will be interviewing Bree Howell, an extremely knowledgeable project manager. Bree is a certified project management professional, certified Scrum Master, certified Scrum Product Owner, and certified ProSide Change Manager. Bree is going to share some of her experiences working with Waterfall project management, Agile project management, getting certified, and she will provide tips for project managers. I'm Kandis Porter, the founder and managing director of Effective Flow Connections, a management consulting company. I'm a certified PMP and have a master's degree in project management from George Washington University. I teach project management, and it is one of my absolute favorite subjects to discuss. Bree, thank you for joining us. Tell me a little bit about yourself and your project management experience.
Yes, I would love to. Well, I have been Pmp certified since 2010, and I really enjoyed the process. I feel like with the Pmp certification, it's a bit more thinking through the situation and what makes sense versus just having like a generic response. So with that, I really enjoyed that entire process. And I did start with Waterfall Methodology and that whole upfront requirements process that a lot of us know. And then I had the experience that many of us have had where requirements change and we're kind of stuck and we need more flexibility. So it might be something longer term duration of a couple years, and we don't have the flexibility to change those requirements that we set initially. The company I was working with at the time decided to shift more of an agile mindset and methodology. And that began my journey into that method and my transition over into agile and learning those practices.
We got PMP certified around the same time. I was very much into studying in 2010 and I officially got certified in 2011. So
Very
on the
nice.
same track there. I also started with Waterfall, which is that predictive type of project management. It's great when you're working on a project where the requirements are really cut and dry and clearly defined. And I completely agree with you. You need more flexibility when the requirements may change or are unknown. And so knowing when you should focus on that waterfall versus the agile, approaches, it can make a huge difference in your success being a project manager.
Definitely. Completely agree.
Well, what types of projects have you worked on and what methodology did you use based on the type?
Yes, I love this because I do think that there is not a one size fits all. So I think that the agile method works great for things where you don't know everything up front. One that I got to work on with that was an interactive presentation for a sales team. They were out in the field and they were going out and meeting with their clients. They're, taking out paper and things like that. And so we were working on building them something that they could show via an iPad or a laptop. And the presentation actually changed and showed graphs based on that customer. So it would be different if I was meeting with you versus if I was meeting with someone else. So it was very customized, but since it was ran agile and more high level requirements, they changed over time as they started seeing the output and what was created. So there was a huge feature that they thought they had to have. And when they saw it, they realized that it wasn't going to work at all. So they came back and they were like, it has to go. And at first, the IT team kind of freaked out because they were like, you said you had to have this. And then, we remembered that this is exactly why we were doing it. And we adjusted it and made it a little different and added in other things that made more sense for them. So for this case, Agile was the perfect way to go. They got to see it and then iterate on it and come up with something better than what their initial thoughts were. On the flip side, I do think waterfall definitely has a place, right? It's tried and true. It's been around for a long time. It's not something that I would throw out the door. I worked at a company, and many companies that we all work at have a lot of regulatory requirements, things that we have to do or have to meet. And in those cases, they're usually very defined as to what they are, and there's a timeline to them. I've worked on a lot of those with those hard deadlines and those specific requirements where we don't get to change them and we can't not hit the deadline. in those, we usually run as waterfall, and it's still, takes a lot of time and the ability to work through that because the requirements usually so vast. But I think that's one of the ones that I love doing waterfall for.
That's great. And I've got an Air Force background and
Yes.
I worked with Federal Aviation Administration. And so completely agree with you that there's a time and a place for waterfall where you need to have that documentation, lots of regulatory. And if you think about it with waterfall, say you're designing a fighter plane, you can't start changing requirements halfway through the project because how is that going to affect the rest of the build of the plane? I mean, you're going to have millions of dollars of scope changes if you're, kind of doing that delivery in increments. So you really do need to have that full, list of requirements and that full design before you start building the plane. So when we think about that true step by step by step, something along that line, waterfall makes complete sense. But I loved your story, about the time and the place for Agile. And it reminded me of this cartoon. I don't know if you've ever seen it, where it shows why you need to have a project charter. And it's got, what the customer described, what the customer actually needed.
We all think we're asking for something and then we see it and we're like, oh, or yeah, it's really great. But usually you're like, maybe not what I thought in my mind, right? And then at least you can change it.
Oh, well, thank you for that story. I think it's a perfect example. How about you tell me a little bit about becoming a certified Scrum Master and certified product owner? What does that entail and look and feel like?
So I did the Scrum Master training first. And when I did it, I actually had no background in it. I didn't know what I was walking into. And the training was a huge awakening. And it was really great. We got to sit in teams around at different tables, and we practiced parts of Agile and being a Scrum Master. And so it was a really great overview of all of the different ceremonies and practices. In that same light, the product owner training was a bit more detailed into that specific role, but a lot of practice as well, as far as like organizing the backlog and how would you handle a difficult stakeholder and things that went into the specific items needed for a product owner. And so both were different. They covered a lot of the same material, but looking at it in different lenses.
Would you say that that certification exam or becoming certified in those areas were more extensive or more challenging than getting your project management professional certification, or about equal or just different?
Totally different. I don't think I can compare anything to the PMP test itself. That test to me was a bear, and 4 hours of multiple choice and that whole method and just knowing exactly what those right answers were, completely different than your Agile training and then tests. So the tests are shorter for the Agile, but the trainings and the certification process is much more interactive. So it kind of ties into directly what you're doing in Agile. You're working together, you're experiencing these things. And it really gives you that basis of the fundamentals and the ceremonies. And I think that if you go in with that into any company who's using Agile, you have that foundation. Everyone implements it in slightly different ways, and every team works a little differently together. But at the end of the day, they're usually doing those like 5 core ceremonies. So it's definitely a good background to have.
I completely agree with you in regards to the PMP certification exam. I don't think I can compare that to anything else that I've ever done, even, master's degrees or other certifications. I mean, that was a significant undertaking as far as preparing for the PMP exam. After 4 straight hours, I didn't even get up and take a break during the exam, in the testing center, heads down. When I hit submit, I had no idea if I'd passed it or not.
Either.
I was so exhausted. So
I held my breath.
And then I don't know if this happened to you, but when I hit, submit, I got a pop-up right away and everyone says, oh, you're going to find out right away if you pass. I got a pop-up and it had me take an exam, a survey about the testing facility. Yes. So not exciting there.
I totally had that. And I was like, I don't care about this survey. And I just kept trying to get to my, my results.
So fun. Memories. Almost 10 years ago for both of us.
That's so crazy.
Well, how have these certifications helped you in your career and life?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing the certifications does, and I think with any certification, is they open doors. So people see that and they know that you have that foundational knowledge. They know that you know, let's call them the best practices, and that you have that background. And so they really do let people know that you've studied what the foundations are. So while you might come in and say, in this situation, I think this makes sense, not saying that you have to be rigid in it, but knowing the tried and true ways that it works is always a benefit.
It's really good points. And I like how you summarize it as best practices. If you see PMP behind someone's name, you know that they're going to know the 5 process groups and 10 knowledge areas. And you can already jump ahead 3 steps when you're interacting with them, because you can just dive right in. Okay, well, what process group are you in as far as managing this project? Where's your focus? Are you having any challenges? You can just pick it up. You know that the other person definitely knows the terminology if they've got those letters, because the test ingrains that in you. I would just love to close with, do you have any tips for either newer project managers or even experienced project managers that you would say, think about this?
Yeah, I have a couple. I always say that a project manager is just someone who works with people. So when people ask what I do, I say that I build relationships. So usually in organizations that I'm working in, there's no functional reporting line to me as the project manager. So I really need the team to give me information, raise issues, tell me if I'm missing something. And most importantly, at the end of the day, I need them to do the work. Making sure that they have what they need and you're constantly touching base with them cannot be overstated. Another one I think is the ability to have what some people think of as difficult conversations. So telling people that things are not going off on the timeline that they initially wanted, or requirements might be changing, and just going back to people and just having that open dialogue. Don't pretend like things are good or that decisions don't need to be made. So don't feel like you can't say, this came up and now this is where we think we're pivoting to. Because at the end of the day, people are going to be happier to have been taken on the journey with you. So I think it's just the ability to live in the unknown. So as a project manager, in whatever methodology you use, things are always changing, and you get to determine when those are big issues and when they're smaller issues. And a lot of people just aren't comfortable with that. They want to come to work and do the same thing every day. And you're not going to get that as a project manager.
So true. I mean, you can be very well versed and very talented at risk management. There are always going to be issues that come up during a project.
Yeah.
You have to plan for that. And I especially like that you highlighted people, because you ask a lot of project managers what they do. And it's true, they do manage scope, time, cost, very technical areas. They do that. That's their job. They make sure that projects meet their objectives, and they do focus on the scope, the time, and the cost. However, you can have the best technical plan ever, and if people don't agree with it, if people aren't doing the work, you're going to fail as a project manager every single time. So exactly. I feel like adding into that mix is, I manage scope, time, and cost, and I lead people.
Yeah.
Yes. Nice way to summarize that and boil it down. Bree, we are so lucky to have you with us today. I really, really appreciate your time and sharing some of your insight with us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I hope you enjoyed this content. Please consider subscribing to my YouTube channel. You can find it by clicking on the link above or searching Kandis Porter. We have a lot more great topics coming your way soon.